Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Outside the Box video. Every now and then I do these videos where I do an analyzation of certain movies, in this case focusing on more of a what if, like what if the movie played out in a different way when it came to its story, its scenes, and its characters, and then seeing what happens to them afterwards, at least compared to what was originally in the film itself. I've done this before, for example, on one of my other videos for Glengarry Glen Ross. I'll include the link for below in case you haven't had a chance to see it. But in this case, I'm going to talk about Jackie Brown, one of my favorite films ever, one of the best films I've ever seen. In fact, one that keeps growing every single time I rewatch it. And we're going to focus on the idea of this. What would have happened if that $500,000, the one that all the characters were essentially going after, what if it was actually delivered, meaning it was actually given to Ordell, and see what happens afterward. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here, see what could have happened if things would have changed to that. I'm going to go ahead and go pretty much set by set when it comes to each character and my own thoughts on what their alternate universe type situations would have been. And I'd love to hear what your own thoughts and comments on there on too. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. First off, as I mentioned, I love Jackie Brown. I think it is a fantastic movie, completely overlooked when it was originally released, going now actually as of the time of this video about 25 years ago. And I think the biggest reason was because it was the second big movie right after essentially all that Pulp Fiction hype. Obviously, Pulp Fiction was a force of nature. Everyone loved that movie. And here was this next movie coming from Quentin Tarantino. And so maybe people were expecting something else, something similar, like they were expecting wild sequences, fast cuts, loud music, even little dance numbers here and there. And so when this movie came out and it turned out to just be a simple heist movie featuring regular characters doing regular things, it almost like it was just out of the blue. Like people just thought, what is this? And so it was completely against what their expectations were. And that's why I got the feeling that it simply just came and went. It didn't get the respect that it deserved. I mean, it did have at least one major award when it came to a supporting actor Oscar, but I don't recall any of the other big ones. Nothing compared to what Pulp Fiction had. But I'm very glad at least that it's getting the recognition that it is now. 25 years later, people are rediscovering this film. In fact, it's there on HBO Max now, and I think it's trending a little bit there. People are finding out about it. What I love about this movie is, again, its simplicity. It's just a simple heist movie, but it has some of the best dialogue and acting I have ever seen. And when you think about it, nothing really happens major within the film. It's just literally a bunch of people talking scene from scene. But it is still very riveting stuff. Like 2 hours plus into it, I'm still glued when it comes to what's being presented. You actually feel for each character too. Each one has their own little quirks, their own little mannerisms too, the way they act, the way they move, and then the way that dialogue just flows from them. It absolutely creates very memorable characters. I personally believe that Samuel L. Jackson's character, Ordell Roby, was completely robbed of an Oscar. Like, this was something of a role that, to this day, I think is one of his best works. Because when you think about it, this is the same guy, if you were to take this role, is the same guy as it was in Pulp Fiction. It's the same actor as he was as Nick Fury in all those other films, as his role in the Kong Skull Island film. Same actor, but it's almost like a completely different person from what he acted before. And it's his own role, completely different from anything else, but it's the same actor. And so that's the kind of stuff that I love when I see actors get so immersed in their role, you completely forget about anything else they've done. They're just literally doing that role itself. So I think, again, he was just robbed of it. But great movie. Highly recommended if you haven't had a chance to see it. Where have you been, basically? Check it out on HBO Max. It's there now, or rent it and so on. And then you'll be able to see exactly what has happened. By the way, I'm still catching up on the novel, too. The novel, I obviously, expands on more things than it was written before. The movie itself, the movie kind of changes some things associated with the novel, so I'm still trying to see some of the differences. But for the sake of this movie, I'm sorry, about this video here, about what would have happened if the $500,000 was delivered, I'm going to go ahead and go by what was presented on screen. Not from the novel per se, even though I might reference it a little bit, but otherwise it's what's mainly from the film itself. So yes, that $500,000, that was the big plot from the movie. That was basically the setup from the get-go. It was as the money that got everyone involved, all the major characters, all five of them basically. They were there to try to make sure that that money somehow either got delivered to one person or another. There was a lot of double crossing involved too, a lot of subterfuge trying to get it delivered right under people, not even just the main players, but also the police as well. And on top of that, here you had the main character, Jackie Brown, eventually double-crossing Ordell for it. And then at the end, of course, spoilers, but he ended up getting killed, and then she ran away with that money. She was able to essentially go about, have her retirement with that money, and live happily ever after. Again, that's at least what was presented within the film. This video, though, is going to analyze what happens if that money was instead delivered as planned. Not planned by the ATF and the police and so on, but instead planned by Ordell. Like, in other words, what would have happened if he got that money and she did not double cross him, and that was the original intention that he had. So let's go by character and then see, just again based my own theories, my own thoughts, what I think would have happened in each character's situation, each of their universes. First off, the main character, Ordell Roby, Samuel Jackson, of course. Let's say he got the $500,000 delivered. Here's what I think would have happened. First off, I think he's a very sensible guy in the sense that he sees what's happening and he's a quick thinker about it. As was mentioned in the film, he's very street smart as well. He's very adaptable to circumstances, and some of those scenes like changed pretty quickly, and he was able to rebound from it up until the very end, up until finally just something caught up to him when it came to his own demise. But up until that point, he was again pretty fluid when he came to handling things. What I think would have happened is when he got that money, he would have eventually retired, as was his plan. He wanted to, as he said, spend the rest of his life spending. I think, though, he would have taken care of some liabilities, and that would have included Jackie Brown herself. Just my own thoughts, just my own opinion, but I think that he would have killed her after he got that money, and here's why. His close inner circle was more on the lines of Lois when it came to Robert De Niro's character, and then Melanie. And when it came to Bridget Fonda's character, those were his closer companions. And of the two, Lois was definitely the closer one. Or Lewis, I'm sorry, the closer one of the two. More on that here in a minute. Melanie was somewhat close as well, but I'll mention her more here in a minute too. The point is, Jackie was more of an outsider when it came to that inner circle. I think he would have seen her more of as a liability because of the fact that she knew about the money. She knew how it got there. She would have obviously helped when it came to it, somehow making sure that the money was delivered to him right under the nose of the ATF and the police. So her knowing that information and having it somewhere in the background of his mind, I think it would have just simply pegged at him all this time. He knew he would have known that his freedom would have continued to rely on her not saying anything. I think this would have been too much of a hindrance to him, like he wanted to have a good night's sleep type stuff. He would have always thought in the back of his head, 6 months down the line, a year down the line, maybe even more, what would have happened if Jackie would have wanted something, if she would have blackmailed him for more money, or she would have gotten something happen to her, and then just like the other character at the beginning, Chris's character, with regards to him kind of like being a rat, and then saying that he was gonna do something to Jackie Brown, like make her a liability to the police in order so that he in turn could be set free. Then that's something that's similar, I think, would have occurred here. She would have thought that she would have been too much of a liability if she was squeezed in a wrong manner by the police, and then that's when she in turn could have given up Ordell in the future. Long story short, again, too much of a liability. I think he would have killed her. The novel even implied how he would have killed her. They kind of, I don't know if they really did or didn't in the novel have a romantic relationship, but it made it seem like he truly wanted her, and she was kind of off and on about it, but it implied that he would have killed her in bed, actually, on top of her being placing a pillow on her and then shooting her through the pillow itself. But also, I think this too, I don't think he would have liked handing over that 10%, that $50,000. I think that in his case, he would have worked hard for that money, and he would have had to have hand over $10,000 just for a simple shipment for something like that. I think that would have gnawed at him too. The novel mentions that Jackie was usually making about $100 to $500 a shipment every time she was bringing over all the other smaller portions of cash. In this case, he was going to have to give her $50,000. I don't think so. Like, this would have been something again where he would have just rather have kept that money and made sure that she was taken off or killed off in some other way. He may have done the actual killing itself, or this could have been like maybe at an exchange of the $50,000, or he would have had someone else kill her too. Maybe even Lois, the Robert De Niro character within the film, since they were so close and they very briefly met. Lois and Jackie did within that apartment scene. There would have been an opportunity later on where she would have never seen him coming. It would have been a simple waiting in the shadows type thing, and then she would have been killed, and then that's it. Now, the ATF and police agents could have still been doing something, like when it comes to tracking him down afterwards, because the other thing too is this. Let's say he did kill her, and then he thought he's just going to spend the rest of his life spending with that $500,000. Here's what I think would have happened to him too. I think that he would have eventually gotten caught. Those ATF and police agents, they were in a position where they had this case. They were building it up for who knows how long. They had how many forces working on it too. Different departments, different personnel as well. They were in a position where they were ready to do the big bust. So to have this happen where Ordell got the money, not only that, but got it from under their nose, and got it in a way where there was no way to implicate him at least, this would have left them really pissed off. Like, these agents and so on, they would not have let this just go. They would not let him walk away scot-free. So Ordell thinking that he would be just free as a bird living the rest of his life as is, I don't think that would have happened either. Either when he killed Jackie, they would have found something tied to him when it came to that, or all those other gun sales and anything else he was doing throughout the time of the movie, and then whatever it was before as well, they would have found some link, no matter how minute, how small it was. They would have found something, and then they would have tied it to him. And it would have been in a way where it would have just been a continuous legal, if not criminal, hassle, to the point where finally they put him in jail somewhere. I'm reminded of a story involving former President Jimmy Carter. There was this mafia guy. I believe he was featured in that movie American Gangster as well, where he flaunted himself, putting himself on a magazine cover, no less. And the story goes that the former president saw this and was so mad about it, was so mad about somebody basically going by under and living their life, their criminal life, scot-free, that he wanted something, anything to be found to be able to implicate them and then have them put in jail. And that's what happened. I think the ATF police agents would have done a very similar thing. So they would have had something found on Ordell, and then he in turn would have been placed in jail, and then that's it. I think he would have been eventually, his life of doing whatever he was with those guns for whom, the time period that he was doing those and who knows what else, it would eventually led him to be placed in jail, and then maybe, serious matter there. I think they would have gotten to Melanie or Lewis as well to make sure that they would have had some other evidence to present to him, to the courts, so that way Ordell could still be spending some time. So long story short for Ordell, if he would have received the money, I think he would have had Jackie killed. And either way, though, if he did or didn't, the police, the ATF agents and others, they would have done things to track him down and make sure, since they knew that he was the one that got the money, that there would have been something implicating him afterward. So I don't think he would have lived the long life in terms of being scot-free or being out there outside of prison long afterward. Now, the other main character, Jackie Brown, let's talk about her here. As I just mentioned, if she would have delivered that money to Ordell, I still think she would have been tragically killed. Like, in other words, she would have done the right thing in terms of her mind, delivering that money to Ordell during her job, but all it would have ended up is just her probably getting a bullet to the back of the brain. And the reason for this, too, is because both the novel and then the movie hints at this repeatedly. It's the sense that she lived a very non-existent type life. Like, as far as I can tell, she wasn't married. She didn't have any kids. She didn't even have a significant spouse. Nobody really seemed to care about her. She just lived like a simple, lonely apartment type life. And so getting rid of her, at least in Ordell's mind and others, would have been easy enough to do. I mean, maybe the aforementioned police agency and the ATF agency, maybe they would have gotten involved, but it would have been more along the lines of trying to implicate Ordell rather than do anything about Jackie herself. Maybe there would have been others that would have done something, who knows. And even then, they kind of already knew that Jackie was a target by that point. By the time that switch was done there at the mall, they either knew or didn't know. I mean, obviously they had suspicions that she was involved in something, like when it came to a money being swiped, but they had no clue what she really took. They thought it was another amount, but they were stating that they really hoped that they got to Ordell before Ordell got to her. So in their case, even if she would have done something correctly, like in terms of delivering the money to Ordell, the idea is that they would have thought that she would have still had some danger. There would have still been something happening to her. Like Chris's Tucker character, like I was mentioning earlier, he was found dead, and then Lois was found dead afterward too. Obviously, they didn't know much of the circumstances associated with it, but they were thinking that she could be another very easy target. And again, everything that I mentioned earlier about her, just basically being by herself, it would have been something where, unless she had someone else just completely protecting her, or she was able to protect herself at all times, I don't think, again, she would have lived very long too. I hope that she would have had at least some suspicion. The idea that Ordell, as I mentioned earlier, handing her $50,000 just out of the blue, that was not something that was going to be just easily done. So long story short with Jackie, what I think would have happened after she delivered that money, unfortunately, tragically, I don't think she would have lived very long afterward. Everything leading up to the circumstances of Ordell, his paranoia, and then, of course, him not wanting to deliver the money, I just don't think it would have been good news for her, too. Now, as far as Ordell's friend, Lois, I think his would have actually been one of the best case scenarios after that money was delivered. He was the closest thing to a friend or a compatriot, something like that, when it came to Ordell. And so he would have either A, continued working for Ordell on whatever other type things, whatever other capers they were doing, at least up to a certain point, or he would have moved elsewhere. Like once Ordell officially retired, then Lois would have essentially moved elsewhere at that point to do anything else. In fact, at certain points in the novel, he was already doing these other jobs. Like at one point, he robbed a liquor store, if I'm not mistaken. So he would have just continued doing those type of jobs. The reason I mention this is about him, his safety almost being guaranteed, is because the novel mentions that they knew each other. Lois and Ordell knew each other for a good number of years. I think it was like 10 or 20 years. They've even done several jobs before too. And so he is the closest thing that Ordell trusts, and he confides in him in a bunch of things. So I don't see him harming Lois, like when it comes to him knowing, how the heist happened, how the money exchange happened, and so on. He knew that he was just part of the team, and that he would have just continued doing other jobs afterward. Obviously, the movie shows that eventually that trust was gone, and then Lois ended up being killed by Ordell. That's obviously the extreme that the movie showed, but otherwise, I don't think anything bad would have happened to him. In fact, I think that even after, let's say, Ordell did kill Jackie Brown and he had those $50,000 now to keep, I think he would have given a portion of it to Lewis as a thank you for whatever he did on that job and for anything else as well. And again, afterward, just Lois would have just done whatever jobs were there, and maybe, just maybe, the only other thing I can think of is that the aforementioned police and the ATF departments and so on, they might have put a little bit of pressure on Lois when it comes to having this caper done right under their noses. They would have been mad about it again, so maybe they would have tried to find something to implicate Lois on, to try to make sure that he could squeal on Ordell, but I don't think he would have given up anything either. The opportunity there to do something like that, they knew each other too much, they were too close to each other. I don't think anything would have happened there. And then Melanie, let's talk about her. In her case, I think she would have had the next best scot-free life after that money was delivered. I mean, yes, the movie does showcase a portion, like a time, when she was openly trying to betray Ordell. But as Ordell himself explained, he knew that this was something that he knew about her characteristics. It was almost like it was the cost of doing business with her. He knew that she would do these kind of things, but they were small things. The serious stuff, like her outright killing him, would never have happened, at least according to his mind. And that she was definitely someone that was, again, within his inner circle. Besides, as he mentioned before, she was at least his little bunny girl, his little surfer girl. So having her there and just staying at that house and then just continuing to pay for everything for her there, get her also her drugs, whatever else she was doing there as well, that was all just this life that she would have continued. She would have probably complained about things here or there, probably again wanting to betray him with others here and there as well, but he knew that this would have not escalated to another point. Plus, you got to remember, she helped him during that heist. She openly helped him. I mean, yeah, she ended up gladly taking a portion of those funds, whatever it was, the amount that Jackie Brown slid under the doorway to her, but she still was there carrying that money back over to both with Lewis and then eventually taking it to Ordell. So in her mindset, she was delivering that large amount of money, that $500,000. So even though she was again talking about doing things afterward, bad things to Ordell, she still was delivering that money to him. And so I think she would have been the next safest person besides Lewis when it came to just living a scot-free life. Now, what would have happened afterward, after he retired? I think she still would have been there with him. He would have been enjoying her company and vice versa. And there would have been a situation where the only thing I think of is kind of similar to Lois, is that if the ATF or police did something to try to bait her, like in other words, arrest her for whatever miscellaneous reason, and then try to make sure that She can squeal on Ordell. I don't think she wouldn't given her. She would have done anything for that either. She would have just kept quiet and then just continued her life with Ordell. Or who knows? Maybe she would have finally just decided to just get out of his life. And I don't think he would have done anything to her. He would have just let her leave at that point. But that's going into more extremes there. And then the final character, Max Cherry, the bail bondsman, pretty simple on his part. Let's say that he was not involved with getting any of that money from the movie itself. Obviously, he helped deliver it to Jackie Brown after she handed it. It was kept in that wardrobe room, and then he went to pick it up. Let's pretend that there was no money there and he didn't have anything to deliver. I think he would have just continued being a simple bail bondsman. The novel did imply multiple times, and then the movie hinted at it, that he was set ready to retire. But either he would or wouldn't have. But either way, I think he would have actually been with Jackie even more. Probably gone out on more casual dates, hanging out more and so on. At least until something would have happened to her, as I mentioned before. But otherwise, I think in his case, he would have had no other further communications with Ordell or anyone else involved with him. Only person that he would have just done anything with from the movie itself just would have been Jackie, and that would have been it. But what do you guys think as far as this analysis? So what would have happened if that $500,000 was truly delivered? As you can see, those are all the main subplots that I think would have occurred within the movie's universe of characters. Let me know what you guys think as far as each one of those items. Am I correct? Am I wrong? Let me know what you think as well, what would have occurred to each of those characters. Love to hear what your thoughts and comments are there too. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.